Welcome to the San Jose Hockey Now podcast. I'm Sheng, editor-in-chief of San Jose Hockey Now. You can also find my work at NBC Sharks and on Twitter at Sheng_Peng.
And I'm Keegan. You can find me on Twitter at halfwall_hockey, at my website half-wallhockey.com, or at San Jose Hockey Now. This week, big guest, huge guest.
We have GM of the San Jose Barracuda, Joe Will, to take all our Barracuda questions. We asked Joe about the goaltending situation. We asked him about players not wanting to, rumored, reportedly, etc., not wanting to stay with the Barracuda. We talk about John McCarthy as a developer of talent. And we talk about every Sharks Barracuda prospect from last year and their progress and what Joe expects from them next season.
It was an awesome new guest to have on the podcast for us. Joe Will answered all of our questions related to the Barracuda, which was great to hear. And it's a new revamped roster for the Barracuda. We'll have to get maybe a little bit more into it before training camp starts, but new revamped roster. And Joe Will talk all about it. So stick around for that interview. It was great. Before that, a little bit of news this week. We're going to talk about the Igor Chernyshov signing his entry-level contract coming over from Russia, what his plans are likely to be for next year. We're going to mention some of the play of Sharks prospects like Brandon Svoboda and Quentin Musty at the World Junior Summer Showcase. We're going to talk about two articles that we both wrote this week. One I wrote on 3 draft trends that you and I have talked about a bunch of times off the air, on the air, that the Sharks have kind of been, maybe looking at for the past 3 years. And then you wrote an article this week from an interview you did with Doug Wilson on Joe Pavelski, which was awesome. And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about the Erik Karlsson trade anniversary. So all that and more this week on the San Jose Hockey Now podcast. That was a good intro. All right. That was almost right off the cuff there. Good, I want everybody to be clapping in the background as they listen to this. But all right, Sheng, let's start with Igor Chernyshov, which we have found out is hopefully the correct way to say that. Chernyshov. So this week it was officially announced that Igor Chernyshov had signed a 3-year entry-level contract with the Sharks and signaling the move over from Russia, which we had actually heard about for over a month now. Mm-hmm. And he was drafted in the import draft to the CHL.
Saginaw Spirit.
At the Saginaw Spirit. And it's official that he's going to be coming over and likely playing for them starting in the fall. So what do you have to say about this signing, as well as any other thoughts about Igor Chernyshov?
Follows the Kasper Halttunen path, which I've mentioned a number of times. Halttunen last year, also for what do you call it? For gold.
Sure.
For passed.
For went.
For went. His
something like that.
Playing in Finland to come to North America, and Halttunen went to the OHL and the London Knights and tore it up there.
Yep.
Sharks are hoping for the repetition of that for Chernyshov to go from Russia to Saginaw also in the OHL. We'll see how. Excuse me. Well, we'll see how that transition works out, but it follows a similar path. And I think even though it's kind of unspoken, but I think an ELC is sort of a reward to leave the home country and to come over here and continue his development path.
Yeah, the same thing happened with Kasper Halttunen, right? He signed his ELC and came over. It's an interesting time for these kind of prospects, and I like the mirroring of Halttunen and Chernyshov. Hopefully he can do the same thing when he comes to juniors. He certainly was playing well enough in Russian juniors, got a few call-ups to the KHL, only had a couple points in the KHL, but was still playing in a number of games there. So big guy, lots of time for his development. And an interesting thing that you had mentioned, or somebody had mentioned, was there any kind of Russian support for Igor Chernyshov? We both, well, you talked with Chernyshov at the draft, and he doesn't speak English. Mm-hmm. I needed a translator at the draft, or doesn't, I guess, speak comfortable enough to speak.
No, I'm pretty sure
draft.
he speaks pretty close to nothing, or
Yeah, you never know.
It seemed like you never know, but
so how much Russian support really is there going to be for him in Saginaw? Which is an interesting question.
right. And I checked up on it. I asked his agent Dan Milstein about it, and Dan said that don't worry about it, that the Gold Star office, that's Milstein's agency, is an hour away from Saginaw. And I believe the Gold Star office is in Ann Arbor, which is indeed about an hour away from Saginaw. And so I think that will help. Also, too, Milstein has had a number of prospects go through Saginaw, from what I understand. Most recently that I remember was a Minchukov. He went through there. So in theory, it should be fine. I think it is always a question anytime a guy comes over and doesn't speak the language and whatnot, that there could be that concern. Haltonen spoke English, and so that's slightly different in that scenario.
Sure.
So it's something to monitor, I guess, but I don't know if it's anything to worry about. And I also did want to mention, just throw in a plug, that I did speak with 3 scouts about Chernyshov after he signed over here. And so they all had actually very interesting, varying opinions of Chernyshov. If you haven't read it, some are higher than others about Chernyshov. I think the flaws in his game maybe aren't as obvious as they were with Haltonen, if that means anything. Yeah. But the immediate offensive impact too may not be as great. We'll see.
Yeah, he's more well-rounded than Haltonen, I would say, as a player, but doesn't have that standout skill for sure that Haltonen does. So needs more time. And also, I think a lot of people were mentioning or thinking like, oh, he can come and play for the Barracuda and that kind of thing. But it's very
possible,
rare.
But it's very unlikely.
Yeah, it's very rare for an 18-year-old player to come into the AHL like that. I remember Yuri Kulik did that a couple of years ago for Buffalo. He came in, did very well in the AHL, but he was a first-round pick.
Different kind of player.
Different player as well. So I think it's very rare for that kind of thing to happen. And I think Chernyshov needs a little bit more time before he's just ready for that. But who knows? I mean, he could come in and be amazing, and the Sharks are forced to keep him, but I feel like it's unlikely.
It's unlikely. I mean, it's also possible that he can come in and make the Sharks out of training camp.
Yeah.
But it's also highly, highly unlikely. So
sure,
I think
we
that's
could too.
Scenarios.
We could
We're
do
not
both
signed by them, so
damn it. I mean, it's unlikely.
So, unless I go streaking in the middle of Sharks practice or training camp and I show like Willie Mays Hayes in Major League, I just run. I outskate.
Yeah.
I
Determination.
Will Smith in a dead heat race from one end of the rink to another. I don't think we're making the Sharks.
Grit and determination. You got this, Sheng. I believe in you.
No, I don't believe in myself though.
But yeah, I think he just needs a little more time. I like Saginaw. Saginaw was a fun team last year.
Yeah, won the Memorial Cup.
Yeah, they had one of my favorite prospects, Radwan Dianicio, who's now graduated into the San.
They still have good prospects there too, right? They have Michael Misa, right?
Yep, and they a competitive team for sure, and it's a good one for him to join. It's not like he's joining a bottom feeder CHL team, so I think that's a great place to go for Chernyshov. Okay, speaking of prospects, this week the World Junior Summer Showcase concluded with a few games at the end, with Canada, Finland, the United States, and Sweden playing the tournament. We had awesome action between Canada and the United States. Notable Sharks prospects there were 6 of them in total. Let's see if we can get them all together. Brandon Svoboda, Quentin Musty, Sam Dickinson, Carson Wetsch, Axel Landen, and Leo Sahlin. Yeah, Leo Sahlin Wallenius. So we had 6 total prospects. I think Wetsch only got into one game. I watched his game. I think it was in like the 3rd or 4th line.
Yeah, against Finland, I believe, right?
Played like Carson Wetsch does. he hit. He made a few shots. Doesn't have much handling skill. That was about it, and didn't get a lot of ice time. But I thought he looked okay. I mean, this isn't for him really, because he's not really gonna make the Team Canada roster. But just to get a little bit of summer hockey in him, I think. A big standout was Sam Dickinson as well. His first game was better than his second game, but that first game, like he was a couple people who were following, like Chris Peters mentioned multiple times that he looked really good. His skating is fantastic, like really, really good for a guy that's 6'3", a defender as well. Just powerful, but also has a lot of agility, four-way mobility. And that was the big standout from like all of the Canadian defenders. He looked the most, I don't know if the pro-ready is the word, but most, like from a skating and physical standpoint, most pro-ready, in my opinion. So it's going to be interesting. I think he will make the team as an under, like the World Junior Championship team.
Yeah, you would think he's more of a lock than maybe even Musty for the USA team.
Yeah, that's a good debate. I think the number of guys for Canada's blue line is not as, I mean, there's a lot of good players, but Dickinson brings another element I think that they are going to need. Kind of like how Z Bouillon brings an element that USA is going to need. Dickinson's in that same kind of category for them. So, and if you don't know, the World Junior Summer Showcase is kind of like it's not a pre-tournament, but it's like you're just trying to see who might fit into your World Junior Championship roster in 6 months.
Right.
Kind of thing.
Right.
4
So
months.
that Carson Wetsch even got invited.
Yeah.
It signals that he's under consideration, but the fact that he didn't play much, maybe that's also a signal of something else, but that he's even in the mix is pretty good.
Yeah, and also the season itself kind of helps to dictate it. Like if Carson Wetsch goes back and develops another gear offensively and looks great, he still might get another invite back to the camp and be another player on this team. There's just a lot of offensive talent, I think, for Canada this upcoming year. So even without guys like Bedard and such and Celebrini.
Right. But the argument against that part, we're going to talk about with Brendan Svoboda, right? That you can't fill a line of four first lines, kind of. You need to kind of have a little variety, and so maybe that's what Wetsch could provide, and that's certainly what a Svoboda looks like he can provide for USA.
Yeah, the Chris Peters put out a projected World Junior Championship roster for Team USA today. And both Svoboda and Musty were on that roster. I think Svoboda ended up on his fourth line and Musty on the second line, which is awesome. I don't think anyone really expected Brandon Svoboda to be in consideration, but he looked really good this tournament. He showed enough offense and net front presence.
Points,
he did. He had I think it was 6 points maybe. Something like that. Enough net front presence. He scored big goals too in big games. So, and towards the bottom six, you want a guy that's big, defensively responsible, and can win faceoffs for you, and that's Brandon Svoboda. So, I think it's interesting that I didn't picture him making this team, but he certainly opened a lot of eyes, kind of like Eric Polkamp did last year. And then he made the team after as well. Even though
you mentioned Svoboda the last episode, so he kept it up through to the end. The first couple of games, you're impressed by him, and it sounds like everybody was impressed by him. Chris Peters wrote about him. Stephen Ellis wrote about him. Yep.
Yeah, he still showed the same thing. Again, not like an amazing creative player, but just smart and responsible. Has a good shot too. Like his wrist shot's pretty good, and that helps. Like those kind of guys that can pot you. And this is in an NHL perspective, but say you've got a fourth line center that can also pot you 10 goals. Those guys are very valuable, and that happens in the NHL.
Sure.
So, anyway, interesting pick. Brandon Svoboda was last year. Quentin Musty looked okay. He had a goal in the last game. Pretty big goal.
Only okay though throughout the tournament for you?
Yeah, I think he looked okay. I wasn't overly impressed with his tournament in general. I think he did enough to show that he needs to be on this team. I think he didn't look out of place in a top line role, and the loss of a lot of players like Cutter Gauthier and Will Smith from last year's team means that I think Musty's has enough offensive skill that he's going to be there. But I wouldn't say this tournament was his breakout performance or anything. He just looked okay at times.
Why only okay though, in terms of what was lacking maybe?
It's kind of the same thing that this is my opinion. Obviously, this isn't set in stone. Other people might have different things that they saw, but Kind of the same thing that Todd Marchand was mentioning. His offense was mostly trying to get the puck to him by like floating at the blue line and waiting rather than going to get the puck. Mm-hmm. And then a lot of one-on-one stuff that just wasn't working when he was trying it. Mm-hmm. When he has the puck in the zone, he looks really good, and he's a creative player and makes lots of good passes. But he also just didn't have the most speed, I would say. He didn't look as fast as like he has throughout the season. I think it's a little bit of summer hockey happening. But it did look bad, and he did score a goal, and he had a good shootout goal as well, and he's got great skills. Just I think it was I think I wanted a little bit more for Musty.
Okay.
Yeah, it's weird that like somebody like Svoboda outproduced Musty by a lot in this tournament, despite like Musty being with guys like Yzerman and Hagens and stuff for most of the tournament. So anyway, not to put a damper on everybody's happiness, but yeah, I thought it was great. I love watching this. It's always like a kind of a little surprise. I'm like, oh, the World Junior Summer Showcase is happening, and you get to watch some good prospects in the middle of summer. So.
Did you get to watch the Swedes much?
A little bit. But to be honest, I was more focused on who they were playing against.
Okay,
So I didn't really
fair enough. I did want to mention then, if you guys haven't seen it, Chris Peters was very, very impressed with Leo Sahlin Wallenius. He wrote about him a couple of times. And so check out Chris's work at Flow Hockey. I also excerpted. Sorry, it's really hot here, so
yeah,
going loopy here. But anyway, I have some of what Chris said at San Jose Hockey Now too, and you should definitely read what Chris wrote about Sahlin Wallenius. It does sound like he might be, at least based on his tournament, really kind of a revelation there. Based on what I read, Musty, like you mentioned, Musty was expected to be pretty good, and he was pretty good or decent or okay or whatever you'd say, right? But Svoboda and Sahlin Wallenius sound like they might be sort of revelations, surprising, that sort of thing, right? I didn't see anything really mentioned about Axel Landen. That's the other guy that was there, but
yeah, he was there, I would say.
Yeah,
I remember watching him.
He was on Sweden's top pairing, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was high in the lineup. I don't know if he was the first pairing or not.
He was Maybe with who was Sending Pelika? No, not Sending Pelika. That wouldn't be it. I forget who he was with, but I'm gonna look it up now just because.
But I can't remember. I mean, he's older too. Axel Landen would be another. He's like this. I think this would be his last year of eligibility for this.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Lindstein, Theo Lindstein.
Oh, Theo Lindstein.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. No, I mean Leo Sahlin was one that I really liked pre-draft too. Mm-hmm. I just didn't get as much chance to watch them as I did the USA and Canada. So. But anyway, we do have the Ivan Halinka coming up. His already started this past week, so it's another bit of prospect hockey, I guess, before we gear up for training camp. So that should be fun to get some more names out there. I think last year, around this time, we're in the training camp era, put out a projected top 10, and I'm sure it was very wrong for the next year's draft. So I'd be curious to go back and see what we did for that.
Well, I do remember we had Yzerman very high up there.
We did.
People thought that Yzerman and Celebrini were... So I think most people had Celebrini ahead, but it's like, if Yzerman sneaks in there, it wouldn't surprise me. But by the time we got to the draft, obviously,
things changed.
A lot of it was Celebrini having such a wonderful year at Boston University, winning the Hobie Baker and all that stuff. So a lot of that was Celebrini just kind of taking off there.
Yeah. And who knows? And the same thing, we had Aaron Kiviharju top 20, and then he went,
100 and something,
22nd. So things change, but it is exciting to see hockey playing again, and we'll have new names to talk about in the next couple weeks. I wrote an article recently. By recently, I mean today, on my website because I hadn't published anything in 4 months. I wrote on 3 hockey trends that the Sharks have we think have employed for the past couple of years since Mike Grier took over as GM.
3 draft trends.
Yeah, 3 draft trends. You and I have mentioned these to each other. I don't know if we've mentioned them on the podcast before.
I feel like we have in passing.
Maybe a little bit. The first one, it has to do with guys like Musty and Haltonen, Cam Lund, Chernyshov, is that
Chernyshov, yeah.
they seem, this is the first trend, they seem to draft like these big, skilled forwards that have some flaws in this 25 to 40 range of picks that they have. They've drafted 5 of them by my count since 2022, which is a lot, all within 10 picks of each other.
Too, right?
Bstad as well as Cam Lund, all within 10 picks of each other. I don't know what that means entirely, but it's interesting to hear, or to see at least. I don't know if it's coincidence. It's only 3 drafts, so all of this could be coincidence. Or do they specifically pick out these guys that kind of fall to these spots? It's interesting. So that was the first one. Second one was on, and you had mentioned this when we talked, that they just don't draft small forwards. They just haven't. They've drafted one forward under 6 foot. I mean, Macklin Celebrini doesn't really count. I'm calling it 6 foot.
Right, Will Smith. Right, yeah, and you mentioned an article, and Will Smith, Macklin Celebrini are so exceptional. They could be 5'10". They'd still be very, 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 very high picks. Yeah. So I don't know if they count, but the only one under 6 foot, Joey Muldowney in 2022, which arguably was still a Doug Wilson Jr. Involved draft.
Yeah, and then none the last 2 years at all. Everybody else seems to be at least 6'1", 6'2", or bigger, other than Celebrini and Smith. But.
And going into your first point about the forwards that they drafted, that size seems to be a factor in all those picks.
Yeah, for sure. But they drafted 3 defenders that are small, which is interesting. Polkamp, Cagnoni, and Havlet are all in this kind of smallish range. Right? They're like 5'10".
And Havlet was a premium pick too, a second-round pick for what it's worth.
Yeah, he's a second rounder, not just like Cagnoni, who is a 4th rounder. Polkamp, who was, I think, a 5th rounder. So, yeah, and then this year that trend kind of stopped because they only drafted defenders over 6 foot, but Leo Wallenius is still a 6 foot defender. The other guys they drafted.
That's a good point about Wallenius. On the smaller side, size isn't a hallmark for him.
Yeah, he is. I mean, he's not small, but he's 6 foot exact, pretty much. And doesn't play small either. So, and he's not like a super flashy offensive guy, that kind of thing. So, I don't consider him a small defender, but he is technically only 6 foot. But It's interesting that they, from their forward perspective, they're going big, and they've had a few smaller defenders in there. That was the second trend. And the third was just that our goaltending is still kind of a mess, and they have mostly only spending late picks on goaltenders. They've 4th round and farther is the highest they've gone with Bopit, Kirsch, and Karastilov. I don't think I'm saying that correctly, but and my own personal bet that they wanted Jacob Fowler at 71 when they got Svoboda.
Right.
Not that they aren't happy with Svoboda, obviously, but I think they wanted Jacob Fowler, who goes to pick 2 picks ahead. So
it is just kind of interesting that how the Sharks, that draft trend with goaltending just continues. Sharks' historical draft trend. I think the highest pick they've ever had of a goalie is 55, Terry Friesen, a long time ago, and that I'm pretty sure that is the how do you say it, the least high for any team out there. I think maybe Anaheim trailed. No, Anaheim actually picked Frederick Anderson in the first round. So no, not Anaheim. But anyway, that might be like the lowest, highest goalie pick that a team has ever made. Any franchise besides the newer ones, obviously Seattle and Vegas. And so that's interesting because all the way going back to their inception, they just never use high picks. And some of it's coincidence. We're fairly certain that the Sharks like Vosted, for example, a couple of years ago. So some of that is just coincidence, but it just happens.
Man,
I think
30 years of drafts.
There is some philosophical element to it, though, especially when they had Warren Strelo as their goaltending coach. Sure. And there was a sort of sense that you can draft guys late and then let Warren mold them, like he molded Evgeny Nabokov, Kiprasov, Toskala down the line. And so that is kind of interesting that's sort of
continuing.
Yeah, if and when the Sharks ever draft a goalie in the first round, I think if you're a longtime fan, I'm like, oh, what?
Yeah, who? I
That
mean,
never
Ben
happens.
Gaudreau was like, we mentioned this like last year. Ben Gaudreau was one of the higher picks they've had ever as
In
a
recent
goaltender.
years,
We
yeah,
almost
yeah.
called him the biggest goalie bust, or we did, I think, call him the biggest goalie bust of the Sharks era. I think. Maybe we did. We did like a draft bust of every position
Oh,
at some
sure,
point.
sure, sure. I
And I
remember that.
think,
He might have been up there because he was
yeah,
the highest. Though they've had a few kind of in that kind of third round, around that 80, 90, 100 range. That seems
sure.
to be a consistent place that they like to pick goalies, but
Yeah, and I mentioned
never.
a
Yeah,
bunch in the article that were available that were drafted like right after picks that they've
sure.
had. And it's not just like that there's not goalies available that other teams value around that range. It's that the Sharks just avoid them. They just don't pick them, which is interesting.
But
But you know, it's
read
a
the
great
article.
article. Yeah, great article. I've
Yeah,
outlined the whole thing.
don't give it all away. But it's an excellent article. You can find it at halfwallhockey.com. Well, I'm missing a dash.
Half-wallhockey.com.
Half dash, yeah.
I gotta do like a GoFundMe for like the $1,000 it'll take to get halfwallhockey.com. I haven't done that yet. Somebody owns it and wants to charge me $1,000 for it, which is crazy. There's not that much of a demand for halfwallhockey.com.
Yeah,
Anyway,
for Dallas. Yeah, well, there's a demand from you, so
yeah, we'll have to
gouge you.
see. They'll gouge me. It's a good article. I was just kind of thinking about that for a long time and wanted to put something out. I'm also going to be releasing soon some articles on the Sharks prospect pool, so look out for that too. What did you write this week, Sheng?
I
Many
wrote
things.
about. Yeah, actually, I write something new pretty much every day.
Yeah.
But over the weekend, though, I put out an article that people started reading a bit. Doug Wilson's comments on Chobovelski. And it was actually mostly a tribute to Joe and his incredible career and his incredible leadership and his game and all the goals that he scored and all that stuff. But I did also get to ask Doug about letting Joe walk in 2019. And this is the first time that Doug has really talked about it since it happened, basically. And so nothing really earth shattering, I would say. Doug Wilson admitted it was a mistake to let Joe Pavelski walk. Well, that's pretty obvious now, right? but but still, though, that he admitted it was credit to him. People don't always admit things like that,
Sure.
and so he took that one on the chin.
Yeah.
And I think overall, I think it just was an interesting kind of honest kind of look at what happened. The best that he could tell me, Doug was very careful to article. That's the occasion is about Joe Pavelski's retirement and honoring Joe. So it's not a time to dredge up every detail of the negotiation. And so Doug made sure to point that out that yeah, it's not Doug's style anyway to do that, even retroactively, but also too that the occasion is for Joe and his incredible career and how he how he beat all the odds, every odd. He seventh round pick, too small, too slow.
Yep.
And even when the Sharks let him go in 2019 because he was older, Pavelski went on to have an incredible 5 years with Dallas.
Yeah.
5 years that I don't think the Sharks predicted, and a lot of people probably didn't predict that he would be that successful. Kind of the second act of his career in Texas, that that would go as well as it did for him. So anyway, I think it was a good look back. Also, too, you mentioned too that there was a figure reported in the Athletic couple weeks ago, a tribute by Joe Pavelski tribute, a good one over by Kevin Kurz. Got a quote from Joe Thornton. Always great to get a quote from Jumbo. But mentioned in an article though was that the Sharks offered Joe 2 years and $10 million, and Doug kind of pushed back on it. He called that figure not accurate without really going too much in detail. So you kind of draw your own conclusions. But I think there is a perception out there that the Sharks sort of lowballed Pavelski.
Sure.
And I don't know if Doug agrees with that. And I think that's why he let slip that much of what happened.
And I know a lot of fans put Joe Pavelski leaving as like the beginning of the end, I guess, that kind of thing. I think if Pavelski stuck around, it's still going to be the end. Like it's
Oh,
not
sure,
gonna.
sure, sure. I think
So
that's a little revisionist because
yeah,
this isn't the NBA. Joe Pavelski isn't
yeah,
going to play 80% of the game like
yep,
LeBron James could or Kobe Bryant or whoever, what name you NBA superstar can play that much of a game and change the course of the outcome. Joe Pavelski, even if he stays and is as good as he was in Dallas, plays you 20 minutes a night. There's 40 other minutes that Joe
yep,
Pavelski can't be on the ice.
yeah, exactly.
So,
And the team
yeah,
was still barren in depth and everything.
right. So I think that what would have happened was it just would have maybe stalled kind of the bottoming out, which
Yeah,
ultimately, as horrible as the years have been for Sharks fans, especially this past season,
yep,
to get to this point now where you have Macklin Celebrini, first overall pick of 2024, you have Will Smith, you have arguably the best draft class in the NHL, or I'm sorry, the best prospects class in the NHL. You needed to bottom out a bit. And so a guy like Joe kind of chugging along and being consistent and popping you in 25, 30 goals a year, as great as that is, that
yeah,
doesn't get you into the playoffs. That doesn't make you contenders. That gets you a few more wins that
sure.
maybe you don't want when you start to consider draft position. I still would have been nice to keep him just because sort of I don't think he would have stalled the descent into the standings really, but he would have been a leader and all those kind of things
Absolutely.
are important. Who better than, let's say, last year in the mess that was last year for a William Eklund to learn from than a Joe Pavelski? And
Yeah.
that's not to discredit the guys who stepped up, guys like Luke Cunnin and Mikhail Granlund when Hurdle got traded. But there's a reason why, and I reported this, that the Sharks wanted Joe to come back, and or maybe I didn't. Maybe someone else reported it. I'm kind of mixing that one. I might be mixing up. I thought I reported it, but maybe.
Sure,
Anyway, it
sure.
doesn't really matter. So I'm not trying to take credit for it because I'm not actually sure if I was the first one on that one. But anyway, though, the Sharks did want to bring him back, and who better to bring back in terms of to teach the kids the right way, Will Smith and Celebrini and whatnot, than a Joe Pavelski, and they went kind of to the same well with Barclay Goodrow, but how about bringing Pavelski and Gaudreau back? That would have been great in terms of just the. I don't know if it would have meant that much in the standings, but that I think
Yeah.
would have been great for the locker room. And so I think that part is important, and that part would have been nice to have around. And maybe you wouldn't have maybe a few less shenanigans from Evander Kane from a couple of years ago, or maybe if they had chosen Pavelski over Kane when that we're going back all the way to the past to like 2017, but that would have been a lot less drama for sure, right? And
Yeah.
a lot less drama than there was during the 2021-22 season when the Sharks were dealing with the Kane drama. And then the year before when Kane was actually a really good, very productive on the ice, but some of the stuff that led to his departure in San Jose that happened there. Maybe that wouldn't happen with Pavelski, and maybe it wouldn't happen at all if Pavelski was here instead of Kane. I don't know again if that means much for the standings, but it would have been a lot less embarrassing.
Yeah. I mean, it would have been sad because Pavelski would be playing useless hockey at the end of his career, but
maybe, but then they would
because
have
he,
probably found a trade for him at some point too.
yeah, true.
Right?
And
They
he
could
did have
have
some
given him the Ray
really,
Bork send off.
yeah, he did have some really good, playoff series with Dallas. Though I think he showed a lot of, and like you said, opened a lot of people's eyes that he still had a lot to give. So it sucks, but it's interesting to hear from Doug Wilson after all these years. I just, not that I heard from him, but reading his words, I was like, it just feels like a blast from the past because I don't know, it's been a couple of years since I've really read anything he said. So that was the big takeaway I had from that article was just forgot what it's like to hear from Doug Wilson. So and he's a
Yeah,
smart guy. Smart guy.
he is. Sharks
Knows his
fans are so
hockey.
used to hearing his voice, right? For 18
Yeah,
years.
exactly. I'm like, oh wait, I know this guy. He's talking to me again. That's what it felt like at least. So, yeah, that awesome article. Good to hear from him too.
Yeah,
Happy he's
thanks. I
doing well.
appreciate it. But yeah, it could be just a case of all's well ends well. Joe needed to go somewhere to win some games, right? And
Yeah,
any talk of Joe Pavelski being possibly a Hall of Famer, I think a lot of it comes from the last 5 years where I think when he left the Sharks in 2019, I don't think people were thinking of him as, oh, this
sure.
guy even a contender for the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
but he was able to continue pretty close to this or the same level of play for the next 5 years and have a lot of big playoff moments, four goals in a playoff game right in the last playoffs,
Mhm.
and lead the Stars to a finals and to 2 other conference finals.
Yeah.
That's really was that really was a nice closing statement from Pavelski in terms of any kind of Hall of Fame eligibility, and that doesn't necessarily happen if he is on, even if he's excelling on a mediocre Sharks team.
Yeah.
And the other part of it, I already mentioned that the Sharks probably needed to bottom out. And if Pavelski was there, Pavelski was not going to help in that kind of regard in terms of them bottoming out. He'd be too good for that. Not great enough, and no one is great enough. Not great enough to bring the Titanic up.
Yeah. Raised it from the dead.
Yeah, not race. Right. That wasn't going to happen with anybody. You can bring Connor McDavid, Wayne Gretzky in his prime to the Sharks team, still not making the playoffs, especially the worst of these Sharks teams. But definitely would have been added a lot of respectability on the ice and off the ice for the Sharks. But that maybe means you don't get William Eklund or all down the line, right? Any of these picks, Will Smith, Macklin Celebrini, who knows?
Yep.
But
Yeah. One day we need to do a draft, or not a draft, a Sharks downfall retrospective. I've been mentioning this forever. We'll make a big thing out of it one day.
maybe you got to wait for them to be good again, because right now
Yeah.
it's a little too close to home, I think.
Yeah. It's the fall,
too real.
the fall and rise of the San Jose Sharks. That's the YouTube video. That's the title.
Yeah, the decline and the rise of the Sharks empire.
Bam, we got this. We gotta get hundreds of clicks.
Tens of clicks.
Tens of clicks. Someone's really gonna love it. All right. Speaking of Doug Wilson and speaking of big trades and all that, it's good segues today. This is the 1-year anniversary of the Erik Karlsson trade. We can do a where were you? Do you remember where you were when the Doug Wilson or the Erik Karlsson trade was announced? Do you remember?
Yeah,
What room were you in?
actually, this I can say I did break this.
Oh yeah.
I didn't break the whole trade, but I was the first one to have Granlund's inclusion in a trade, and also Jeff Petry's inclusion in a trade. So
Nice.
when you see when trades are broken in baseball, and it's always funny, they basically every part of the trade is credited to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
John Heyman had Baltimore's return. Ken Rosenthal had what Los Angeles is getting. Robert Murray, fan-sided, had that there's money involved.
Yeah, you get like little bits. No.
So I'm proud to say that you can look back on it that on those major components of the trade that. So when the trade was happening, I was working the trade basically.
I was well, two things. We recorded a podcast where I was in the airport, an emergency podcast on the Erik Karlsson trade after it happened. And before that day, I was driving to said airport in my future mother-in-law's car, and my fiance was reading me the details like from her phone of who was being probably reading your tweets, and I was like just like holding the wheel like this, just listening while she's like reading them to me, and I'm like, I can't.
What the?
I was like, I can't check my fucking phone. I'm like, just like
retain.
I'm driving on the road, being like, what's the retention? Did you say 50? It was 15 or whatever. Yeah, I remember that day really well. I remember being super pumped about the return, and I still am. I think it was a great return, and awesome that we got somebody like Sam Dickinson out of the whole thing.
Yeah. I had to be honest that, and we talked about this on the emergency podcast, that I still think that the Sharks could have retained more, but we talked to Jonathan Becker about this. Obviously not Becker's money or my money, or if it's Hasselblatter's money. Another part of it too that I did recognize the day of is that, and I mentioned it, I wrote a little bit about the 1 year of the trade today, that it's still wait and see. Obviously, the early returns look great for the Sharks. Erik Karlsson was not as good as he was his last year with the Sharks, right? Which, not that anyone's cheering against Erik, but that if Eric is as good as he was the year before his Norris Trophy year, that means that Mike Grier sold him not on a high, sold him at, he could have got more, maybe he could have held out, right? That's possible, right? But because Eric did not repeat his Norris season, so it looks like Mike traded him at a high. And also Pittsburgh, obviously, in part, not solely because, but in part because Eric wasn't as good. They missed the playoffs. And so that, of course, helped the Pittsburgh Penguins, the first round pick that the Sharks got. And that pick that was, I think most people would have guessed would be in like the 2025 range, right? I don't think people expected the Penguins with Carlson to be a Stanley Cup finalist or anything like that. Not a contender like the Golden Knights were out in the first round, but the top contender like the Oilers or something like that, or the Panthers, right? No one, I don't think people saw that with the Penguins, but I think everyone was pretty comfortable that they will make the playoffs at least. And so that would put the pick at 2025, but picking it up number 14, the Penguins just missed the playoffs. And so you have that kind of, I won't call it luck, but you have that bit of kind of fortune run drop to you in the trade. And of course, because your pick is that high, you're able to flip it to Buffalo. If your pick was 20 or 25, not as likely that the Sabres would take that as the centerpiece for a trade for the number 11 pick that becomes Sam Dickinson.
And the second that they used to go to Buffalo, I don't think it was the same second, but they only got it because they picked up Wallman. So they had an extra one, basically. So like, put Wallman in the trade. I don't care. You got Wallman too. You got Wallman, you got Dickinson, you got Granlund, you got Ruta. That's a great return. And you only had to retain.
Yeah, you only had to retain 15. So little. And so I think that's the undecided part that I think if things, I think the way the Sharks are, and I've mentioned this many, many times, they've started investing in the team around with Tyler Toffoli and things like that, like major investments. Obviously, you win the lottery. You have Macklin Celebrini, a guy that you expect to be a cornerstone number one player for your team. And so if that plan is what I think the best of what Mike Grier hoped for, and that happened, the draft lottery and all that stuff, right? And so if that kind of plan continues to work itself out this year, what's that going to mean? That means that Macklin Celebrini is an immediate impact player, that Will Smith is right there or really, really close. The vets you sign are good. So that means that, hey, wow, so we've added 2 possible top 6 players here, young players, in Celebrini and Smith. Maybe we're ready for the next step. And that's where the cap space, right, that you have from the Erik Karlsson trade, 2025, 26, 2026, 27. Those are the last 2 years of Karlsson's deal, that maybe that starts to be useful. And so you can take a big swing in free agency. That's where the Leon Draisaitl rumors, that's where that comes from, right? It may not be a Draisaitl, but maybe it'll be somebody else, right? And so I'm curious to see what they do with that extra cap space, if anything. But of course, it is dependent on other things happening, like Celebrini being as good as advertised.
Of course,
Anyway, so I think though overall, I still have questions about that, the retention, but
I just liked the signal that it was like, we're not going to be tied to his contract, like you're mentioning, that you have the ability,
I get what you're saying,
to sign who you want to in free agency, whoever wants to come here to play with the younger guys. So,
and I get too that a lot of people equate like, okay, this amount of money gets you this amount of money retained gets you a first round pick, and that's not the way it works in the real world. I think we may have talked with Becker about this on maybe off the air, but I think if it was off there, I think we can mention a little bit without giving away too much, that that's just not how things work. Like, you can retain $5 million a year of Karlsson, but that would have been for 4 more years, right? And the equivalent value might have been 3 or 4 first round picks, but no team is trading you 3 first. I've never seen that in NHL. That just doesn't happen. Maybe Wayne Gretzky in his prime, right? You're not getting 3 first round picks for a team. So once they give you that first round pick, that's, like pulling teeth. You want more first round picks, then you got to do double the dental work, triple the dental work to pull those out. More likely, the more money you retain, then they're like, we're not going to give you any more first round picks. We cannot do that. but okay, maybe we'll give you some seconds or something like that.
Yeah, or prospects or whatever, but like
Right,
more
but not their
scratch-offs,
grade
you
A
know?
prospects, right? Then it'll be
Yeah.
like, okay, maybe we'll give you this B level prospect instead. That's just
Sure.
the reality of it. And so the Sharks didn't walk away from XXX like all these first
Yeah.
round picks by not retaining. They weren't gonna. I think the maximum you probably get a deal, as much as you want to retain, might be 2 first round picks, which still could
Yeah.
have been worth it. But I'm just saying though that it's not a sort of 4 million retained means a first round pick. So if you retain the rest of Carlson's contract, that means 4 first round pick. You better get 4 first round picks back then. It's just
Yeah.
not the way things work.
I probably my favorite trade that Mike Grier has done, I think.
Yeah.
I really just it just signaled the complete changeover of the past. He sold at a high. There's nothing left from the old Sharks that reminds me, like obviously Couture and Vlasic are still here, but there's nothing that makes me think, oh shit, this is gonna last forever. And Carlson made it seem like, ah shit, this is gonna last forever. Like we're gonna be bad forever with an $11.5 million aging offensive defenseman. We're gonna be bad forever.
Well, you may actually make a really interesting point there. I wonder, I got to look back at Vlasic's game log, but I'm sure that there were games last year. Might have been the first game in who knows how long, got to look it up, but that none of the Sharks sort of old guard played. Couture obviously was hurt almost all the year, so he didn't. Hurdle was traded mid-season. So if Vlasic was basically scratched or injured after the trade deadline, then or not, no, Hurdle was hurt in like January, so or All-Star, right? So
yeah, around that time.
So any game like after the All-Star break would have been a game without any of the old guard, which is kind of interesting, right? I guess LeBanc was scratched a lot too, and LeBanc.
It's probably
kind of
one game
at
in
the
there.
end of the old guard.
And maybe that one, I call it the Sharkacuda game. They played against Winnipeg with like, I don't know, half of the Barracuda roster because of COVID.
I
don't remember.
Right. But probably Couture was in that. Who knows, right?
I don't remember. But
yeah. I would bet that's actually an interesting thing to look at. I think I will look at that for fun. That's an interesting thing that you bring up there. So
yeah, it was over. And
yeah.
Obviously, Vlasic's on the last 2 years of his deal, which felt like it was never going to end. But and then Couture has still got lots of time left on his deal, depending on injury and such. But
right, but opening night tonight opening night next in October could be the first one without any of those guys.
Yeah,
without all the Hurdle, Vlasic. If Couture is hurt, Vlasic is scratched.
Yep.
Down the line. Pavelski, Thornton, Burns, right? All the guys that they've been shedding from the glory years or the golden age or whatever. So
it's a new era. It's the complete new era, and that's what that Carlson trade signified to me.
Right,
was the beginning of the new era.
And let's we didn't mention, but let's also give a lot of credit to Mikhail Granlund, who came in that trade, and I don't think a lot was expected of him. And they were telling us in training camp. I remember David Quinn was you can tell when I think I mentioned this before, that you can tell when you talk to coaches, if you talk with coaches enough, or if you talk to a specific coach enough, you get to know kind of their tells, right? And so if you ask them about putt, they're always going to say something good about it. But I could tell in training camp when David Quinn was excited about Mikhail Granlund and not so excited about Kevin LeBanc.
Sure.
The words were the same, but
yeah, it's coach speak, you know.
A little bit, yeah. You could tell if it's kind of coach speak, and you can't. People will say, "Why don't you write about it?" But you kind of can't write about it because in case, well, what if Kevin LeBanc has a good year? And coaches are like, "I said it, I told you." But I was like, well, "Did you really mean it?" And that's a whole nother. That's a whole. But
it's like the way that they spoke about Mugumadulin last training camp too. They were like,
right. There was a genuine excitement about a guy, and with Granlund, there was the same thing, even in training camp that David Quinn was really, really impressed with this guy, and he shelled out for the Sharks. I just want to give credit to him that whatever happens with Granlund next, it's going to be the last year of his contract. And I actually we talked about this a little bit. We'll probably talk about through the season a lot, that if he continues his play and if he factored in with his leadership, that I think there's an argument actually for keeping him. But anyway, though, that he's a guy that nothing was expected of pretty much. And he really turned around his career, and you talk about the old guard of the Sharks leaving in Hurdle, right? And so that leadership, right, that walked out the door with Couture being injured and Hurdle being traded. Granlund did his best and to fill in for that. I think he did a good job of that, and he was named alternate captain for a reason. And so I just want to shout out his performance. So that's actually another feather in Mike Grier's cap too there.
Yeah. Coming up aces for Mike Grier. All right, that's gonna do it for us this week. I think you have one more thing to talk about.
Yeah,
it's very brief.
I just wanted to last call for Andy Drexler. He is a subscriber that won one of the autograph cards in the giveaway, the 4th anniversary giveaway from a couple of weeks ago. Mm-hmm. Great autograph cards. You're missing out, Andy. Last call. You're the only person that hasn't responded from the top 4 winners.
What
Joe
did he
Pavelski
win?
autograph, Joe Thornton autograph, William Eklund, Patrick Marleau. I think the first 2 have been. Andy was the 3rd pick, so the first 2 have been selected. Someone picked, I think, the Pavelski autograph, and then someone picked, I think, the Eklund autograph. So actually, to me, the nicest card of the lot is the Thornton autograph, because not only is it an autograph, but it has a piece of his game-worn jersey, and also too, it has a picture of Joe Thornton after winning the Hart and the Art
That's
Ross.
a great picture.
So great Sharks moment. Only Sharks player to win the Hart so far, and yeah, so I think it's a really fantastic card. And so I think Andy, I'm going to give you. I emailed Andy, and I couldn't find any other information for him. So if anyone knows Andy Drexler, a Sharks fan named Andy Drexler, reach out to him, let him know. And Andy, I'm going to give you, let's just say, to the end of this week. And you know where to find me on Twitter. And my email's on my Twitter too. Or you can email me at the San Jose Hockey Now email, which is sjhockeynow@gmail. So I think that's plenty. It's been, I think, almost 3 weeks or so. So I think that's plenty of time. And so last call here, Andy, to win. And thank you for subscribing to win your autographed Sharks card.
And then I guess if Andy does not respond next week, we'll pick a winner.
No, actually, I already did the numbering order.
Oh,
so yeah,
that's right. So there already is a winner.
There is already a fourth place winner, and then there's somebody alternate winner that I picked in a randomizer back then. So
okay.
Yeah.
Well, somebody might be getting a card that's not Andy Drexler then.
Yes.
Also, Andy, if you listen to this, we apologize for saying your name 100 times. Hopefully you're cool about it.
We're trying to get you a card.
We're trying to get you a Joe Thornton card.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Stick around for the Joe Will interview. Joe was great. He gave us lots of insights into the Barracuda and managing that roster and just what that's all about. And it's a guy that's kind of maybe hasn't been around in the spotlight since his interim GM days. So really great to talk with him about that.
Right,
as well.
You asked him about the Tomas Hertl trade too.
I did. I asked him about the.
Oh, I'm sorry, not the trade. No, the
extension.
Re-signing of Tomas Hertl.
Yeah, the Tomas Hertl re-signing
happened when Joe was the GM.
Yeah, that and the Jake Middleton trade are probably his biggest actions as GM. So, it was an interesting to get his response on that, his perspective as the interim GM during that time. So, hope you all enjoy, and we will see you next week. Bye.
Joe Will has been with the San Jose Sharks organization from the beginning. That's over 30 years with the Sharks, wearing pretty much every hat there is in the organization, from contracts to analytics to even being interim GM for a bit. He's been an assistant GM since 2011 and has been the GM of the Sharks AHL affiliate, be it the Worcester Sharks or San Jose Barracuda, since 2013. Welcome on, Joe.
Thanks, Sheng. Great to be here.
And, we're all about the hard-hitting questions here. So first question here, what job with the Sharks do you want to do that you haven't done before?
Oh, it's, I think, win a Calder Cup, win a Stanley Cup. That's what I want to do that we haven't done before. That's the focus. Done most everything else to date here, but that's really it. Just see this through and get it to the next level.
Well, that's an outstanding answer. So yeah, you're not gunning for you're not gunning for Logan Couture's job there. So that's good.
Yeah,
One thing I
see that.
was asking, have you ever put on the Sharky costume? That's one job that I thought of that maybe you haven't done.
I have not.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Wouldn't want to see that either. I don't think.
Not even for fun. Yeah, just put on the shark. Yeah, I don't assume I don't assume that you're gonna play Sharky, but even just for a day, just for a minute, put on the headgear.
Well, ever since I saw him get caught up in the rafters and saw the fire department come out and try to get him down the one time, I saw at that point it's a hazardous job, so I'll leave that to the pros.
Mm-hmm. It's a little bit of a work hazard for sure. Joe, it's been a pretty big summer for the Barracuda. They had a couple of free agent signings. Andrew, I'm going to say it wrong, Podorowski, Lucas Carlson, and Jimmy Schultz. Where do you think they're going to slot in with the Barracuda this year?
Well, I think we got them to fill specific needs, and we're very fortunate to get all of them, especially, starting with the two players from Coachella, to have them come over from a team that's, been in the conference or in the Calder Cup finals the past few years. Podorowski, I believe, is one of the best centermen in the league. He's just going to help everybody around him. He'll help the other centers. He'll help the wingers. And Schultz is really a shutdown D for us. And so to get them to jump from Coachella over to us is a big win. And as with Lucas Carlson coming over from Charlotte, we're a very good team over in the Eastern Conference. He's been an all-star defenseman there, one of the top point scorers in the league for defensemen, and I believe they're also, all three of them, good depth for the organization. So we're just very pleased to have them, and I think they'll fill top roles as a top center, top defenseman, and really a top shutdown defenseman.
There's still a lot of solid AHL free agents out there. Do you see the Barracuda maybe adding one more high-end player before camp?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we add a forward here. We're kind of we're a bit picky, looking for the right fit, and I think there are some out there. So I could see us adding a forward here in the next little while.
What's the fit?
The fit, I think, is just to probably give us a little bit more depth down the middle. I think we have plenty of players that can play down the middle. They're kind of center wings, but it's something that we're looking at right now, and we'll see. We're pretty content with what we have, but there are some good players out there yet, and we're trying to see if we could fit somebody else in.
And a couple other questions here related to just some free agent sightings, but do you guys think about possibly bringing in another goalie, or are you worried about goaltending being an issue? I know at the beginning of last year, it seemed like it was kind of lagging behind a couple of the other position groups with some younger guys, but do you guys plan on bringing in another goalie, you think?
I'd never say never. I think we're always looking. As we looked at the draft, we brought in a couple of young goalies at that point, but in the organization, we're just trying to fill the organization with prospects at all positions. And I think we have a couple of good prospects in Cronin Romanoff and in Gabe Carrier. But we're looking around, and who knows what could come up here. But we're picky, and we'll just wait and see if there's something that really works to help the prospect pool. But having said that, I do expect the two players that we had last year in Romanoff and Krona to make a jump. I think there's usually an adjustment year in the American League, and I think they've had a full year in the summer just to kind of work on some things, and I expect them to come back with that experience and make a jump. And Gabe Carrier, got a little bit of work here at the end of the year, and very competitive, hardworking goaltender out of Vermont. So I'm happy with the players that we have, but we're always looking.
When Mike talked maybe a couple months ago, it sounded like getting a number 3 goalie seemed like more of a priority, maybe before free agency, before the draft. He mentioned getting a number 3 goalie. It sounds like that has maybe changed then, based on what you're saying here. If that has changed, why has it changed?
No, it hasn't really changed. I mean, just when I say that, probably a goaltending prospect, I mean that number 3 goaltender is somebody that we would be looking at that would have the more of a prospect flavor to them, probably a little bit younger, and you could grow with for a little while, as opposed to somebody maybe for 1 year or something like that. Having said that, if we kind of go through everything and younger players or younger goaltenders aren't available, we might go back and get somebody who, is a little bit older and can fill that number 3 in that regard. But, we are looking more on the prospect end whenever we can with any of the players that we bring in.
Oh, okay. So if I'm following, then when the talk about adding number 3 goalie was maybe more about adding somebody on the younger side of things that I assume that you feel comfortable playing in NHL, but somebody with that kind of experience instead of say a 30 something guy or whatever.
Yeah, that's usually, if we have the choice of one over the other, we'd want the younger player that can grow with us for a while and grow with everybody else that we're bringing in. Having said that, if they're not available, it's not a huge amount of goaltenders out there. If they're not available, then we'll take the best player that we could get within there. But again, it's a delicate balance to give opportunity to the players to the goaltenders that we have right now, and then to say maybe we need a little bit more to cover some depth, perhaps with the Sharks if we need depth.
Do you guys feel pretty good that if there are injuries at the NHL side, when we've been talking about number 3 goalie, I've been pretty focused on the Barracuda starter. But if there's injuries at the NHL level, do you feel pretty good with wherever Krona and Romanov are that they could step into the NHL and play some games if you need them to?
Yeah, and I think it really depends on the length of an injury or the length of the amount of time of the call up. But last year we saw that in a pinch that both guys could come up and play in for a couple of games and such. Now for a longer, it usually does take a little bit more experience. I mean, history says it with that. I mean, these two players have less than 50 pro games under their belt, and usually does take players that have a little bit more than that for long-term recall. So that's the area when we're talking about like a number 3 in the organization is perhaps somebody with a little bit more experience, a few more games under their belt.
Sure. And we were talking about the Barracuda next year, but I wanted to, before we talk, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the prospects in the Barracuda, how some of these guys performed last year, Romanov, Krona, Bordeleau, Mukamadulin, guys like that. But before we get there, though, I wanted to ask you about a couple of things, just sort of stories that have been circulating about the Barracuda the last couple of years. And I don't know if you've ever addressed them. And so now that you're here, wanted to put them to you. And one of the things that has sort of been around for the last couple of years is that the veterans that you've signed in recent years, that perhaps they haven't been happy in San Jose. There's been negative stories about meals, and that even maybe the wives have been unhappy with the treatment. And so just generally, has player treatment been any kind of issue in San Jose in recent years? Have you received that kind of feedback from some of the veteran players who have departed?
I've got no feedback about that. Our meals are great. Our chef at TechCU Arena in Chef James is outstanding, and our meals have been great. Their players, have breakfast and lunch and post game and such. So everything's been great. In TechCU, I think everybody enjoys the experience in TechCU. So I don't know how anybody could not enjoy the experience in TechCU. I think it goes down to at times players, if they, if we're not winning, which we hadn't been for the past few years, we expect to change that. And also for recalls. I think a lot of times when you're not winning and you're not recalled, you notice players in the American League quite often jump around year to year from team to team.
Sure.
There's a group of them that do, and that's because they're really trying to find their own personal momentum with the team to where it works and they can be recalled. And I think some guys aren't happy when they're not recalled. When they're when they come in and they think, we're low in the standings. They could probably make the team. It's probably their chance, and they can jump and become a NHLer or get their opportunity here, and it doesn't happen, and they're not happy. So I think anything in that regard of somebody not being happy, I don't know many people that are happy when you're not winning. So, I mean, sure. I think that goes along with that. And then I think with recalls, that's part of it and why players jump around a bit. But as far as I think the day-to-day, what players are given and provided, they're very happy in our arena and in our organization.
And that's a good time to remind people of the AHL development rule. That means basically that at any game you can only play 5 players of a certain level of experience in a game. To I think it's 320 or more high level games, and so that also limits sort of the number of players that you can have on your team on the veteran side. And so you can't just keep your veterans from year to year. You're always looking to upgrade and whatnot. But on that question though, I guess on a broader sense though, since you guys have come from San Jose, have you found that you have had to sort of, how has player treatment changed in terms of, obviously being in a Bay Area, it's more expensive. So has that been a consideration? So kind of broadly going back to Worcester and that change over here, how have you improved how you've treated your players?
I think it just, players came out here and the first thing they see, well, it's sunshine. The rink is close to everywhere in the area. They absolutely love being here. But there's a little sticker shock on cost of living. So what they've done is they've adapted, whereas they might have a 2-bedroom apartment, maybe 3 or 4 of them will get together. And so they've been very resourceful as far as that goes. And that's really been a change from when we were in Worcester is just that adapting to make it work. But they're very happy about, like the rest of us, just being out in such a beautiful area and a vibrant community and a great hockey community in San Jose. So they're very happy about that. And that's really been the change. And, again, coming out, our division itself has been a great division too, as they love it. Out west, who'd have thought that we'd have teams, 5 teams in California and a 10-team Western division that's or Pacific division that's probably the top division in the American Hockey League.
And speaking specifically of free agency, though, do you find that you have to give better, people talk these days about tax-free states and you don't have to offer as much money if you're in a tax-free state in free agency. So do you find being in San Jose that there is some degree of I've got to give a slightly better offer than maybe somebody in, I don't know, in the Texas Stars might have to offer AHL
Florida or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, you might. I mean, it's a combination of many things. Players will look at the opportunity they might have. They might come in and say, well, they don't have any wings or they don't have many centers. So I'm going to, it's a great opportunity for me to play. And no matter what
Right.
the cost of living or taxes, if you have an opportunity to play and go up in the NHL, it's a win. So they look at opportunity. They look at, quality of life, and they do look at the cost of things. So yes, it is a consideration balanced with everything else. So I think we're seeing a jump. Again, getting the players from Coachella and Charlotte this year were a big win for us. I think it shows that investing in the building in TechCU Arena has paid dividends, because people do want to come and play there once they see it, and they saw it in the All-Star game, and some of the visiting teams have seen it. They say, yeah, that's great facilities to train and play, and I want to be there. And also, they sense a momentum. They've seen our draft. They've seen our free agency. They've seen some different things that are building out here, and they sense the momentum and they want to be a part of it. So again, it's momentum swings, whereas maybe, in the past 3-4 years, we've had, some hurdles and some obstacles there. And I think the flywheel and the momentum is kind of going in the right direction now. And we're seeing, a lot of positivity and people jumping on.
And what can you say specifically about Coach John McCarthy, particularly as a developer of talent? I think the CUDA obviously haven't been very good the past couple of years. They haven't really made the playoffs since he's been the coach. But his role seems to be more of a developer of the young guys that you're mentioning. Do you think fans equate the on-ice standings with a lack of development of the prospects? And what would you say to fans that do kind of equate the two?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's that much on development right now. It's just like the Sharks. We've had our bumps in the road, as far as just having a quantity of depth and talent and everything that we're building on right now. So we've just been a little bit behind the pack there, and it's really kind of been more about the amount of players and talent that we've had. We're building onto that right now. The players that he's had, and that the coaching staff has had, they've developed to come up to the Sharks. I mean, Eklund developed through the Barracuda quite well. Muck Madulin is right on the cusp, and we've had other recalls of Bordeleau and others within there that as they come up to the Sharks, they're they played well, and they've been developed well here. So one of the reasons. A major reason why John McCarthy came in here is always been loyal to this organization, and he was always as a player and the captain of the Barracuda and the Worcester Sharks. He was developing at that point in time. He was a player that we would put young developing players, important players to the organization on his line, and he was a coach to them and a mentor, and he would help them along the way. And you ask a lot of the players over the years that came up to the Sharks who played with him, he was doing that back then. So he's a really good developer of players and of talent, and we're going to be providing more of that. So I have the utmost confidence in John, and it's just going to get better as we're pumping in more talent and more depth.
And obviously, no one is happy with the standings, but it sounds like you're saying that there's no concern, no question. You guys are entirely happy with John McCarthy as a developer of talent.
Yeah, I sure am. I mean, I believe in him, and he works hard and develops, and he's bright, and it's just a matter of getting over the hump with the players that the talent that we have coming in now, and which we are on the way to doing.
What do you think is his strength as a development guy?
I think it's his work ethic and just knowing what it takes to kind of repeat the process and teach. Teaching is a lot of repetition. Teaching, there's nothing magic to it. It's just a lot of repetition, a lot of staying on top of things, and patience, and that he has. He has a lot of patience, and he treats it more like as a teacher, and that. We need to get players ready to, come up to the Sharks, and that patience is really his strength.
And Joe, we want to kind of get to the main focus of this interview, and just to talk about specific players, prospects from last year. And we're just going to run through a bunch of your players from last year, and specifically, we're wondering how they progressed throughout last year, like sort of a grade or report on how they did last year, and then what were they asked to focus on this off season. We're curious about a number of these guys, so we're just going to rattle off a bunch of names and just kind of tell us sort of what you thought about each of these players throughout the season, how they grew throughout the season, and what you're hoping that they work on.
Great.
So we're going to start with Magnus Corona, which is an interesting one because he was acquired in I think it was a trade deadline trade a couple of years back, many years back, and has kind of slowly come through the college ranks and now into the Barracuda. How do you think he's progressed?
I think he's progressed fine. Again, with goaltenders, unlike position players, you can't hide a goaltender very much. You throw them right into the game, and they're thrown right into the action. And with Magnus, you went in there and you just had to put him into the American Hockey League and let him play games, and as I always say, build mileage on the odometer, and gaining the experience. Getting up to the Sharks and being able to play a few games up there, it's really been experience. And now just for him in the summer to kind of sit back, get some rest, think about it throughout the year, think of the little adjustments he wants to make. Happy with this progress and excited to see him this year.
Do you think he was excited to get a full start after the kind of a stop and start of his first NHL game where it was kind of a quick pull there?
No, absolutely. It was a little chaotic there with the injuries, and then that time of the year. Mm-hmm. But then getting in and it was great to have him get a start and see how he played.
We're also going to talk about Georgi Romanov, which is an interesting one as well because he kind of, I wouldn't say came out of nowhere, but a lot of fans hadn't heard of this guy when he was acquired. So what can you tell us about Georgie?
Yeah, came out of the KHL, and a player who has size and athleticism, and for him it was a big adjustment to North America. And so North America is, size, rank, culture, style of play, all kinds of different things with that. And that was a big adjustment for him throughout the year. So I think that was his big adjustment. And again, he got to play in all situations, had his ups and downs throughout the year, had a little taste with the Sharks and such. And I expect him to come back a little bit more experienced and ready to go for a second pro season.
Going back to sort of the question about a number 3 goalie, and also speaking of Krona and Romanov, why would the focus be like, for example, last year? Do you think that there could have been a benefit for having a more veteran guy around for Krona and Romanov to talk to last year?
Really, with McAniemi, the thought with him is he had some experience, back to playing in Chicago a few years ago, and he just had the injury bug, and that he couldn't really get over when he was here. And that was, so we really did have a player for last year that we thought would kind of take on the 3 role, and then work well in combination with the other 2. And he was hurt quite often. So I feel that injuries really kind of got in the way there. The plan, if he wouldn't have been injured and had kind of continuing injuries, we would have had a 3-man rotation, probably would have helped them all out a little bit better.
And so then looking now into next year, is a lot of what you guys are counting on that year of development for Krona and Romanov, that maybe they don't necessarily need a veteran around as much as maybe last year they might have?
I think we take one again. You just need to have the right one. Both of them still have under 50 pro games to them, and that's just not a whole lot of experience. I expect them to make a jump because they've had a year of experience, but it's still, I think that's in context of the American League. No context to be ready for the NHL as a 3 or depth that way. Players can always surprise you, but history tells you they need a little bit more than 50 games American League, which they're not even at yet. They need a little bit more than that to kind of make that jump. So again, we're looking, and just we'll see what happens.
And going to the forwards, I wanted to ask you about Thomas Bordeleau. And I think Bordeleau is actually one of the better examples of a guy whose game really changed in the time under John McCarthy. How much of it is just John, the development staff? I'm sure they're a big part of it, but also a lot of it is obviously credit to Thomas. And so can you just speak to how he's kind of changed his game to kind of manage the puck better and to be kind of more of a pro NHL player, not just be kind of a lot of flash, which is maybe how he started when the Sharks first signed him, but how he's been able to mature his game, especially this past season?
Yeah, I mean, we've asked a lot of Thomas because we played him at center and wing, and also is when he's been up with the Sharks, he's played more minutes and played in a higher role, and unlike a player maybe lower in the lineup that plays a limited amount of minutes, 6 or 7 minutes, and again you can play them in a role and almost like hide them better. With Thomas, he's played more and had more responsibility. So I give the coaching staff and development staff a lot of credit. It just takes time to learn. Like I said, he certainly has a skill. And it's not the willingness to defend with him. It's just the experience of you're going up against the best players in the world. You need to have that experience on how to play against them and how to match them up. You're going from lower levels of hockey and being a younger player to all of a sudden you're up against the best players in the world, and that with a lot of our young skill. That's that's the challenge. That's what we work on with them.
One of my personal favorite players to watch, Daniil Gushchin. I talk about Gushchin a lot on this podcast. That's why Shag's laughing. What do you think specifically Gushchin needs to work on to make that next jump, to make the jump from top line AHL scorer to NHL player?
Honestly, with him, I think it's still just experience. With him and Boards, it's just more games and a little bit more experience in different situations. They've been through quite a bit the past few years. But again, they're still very young. Both players we had come in when they were 19, 20 years old, and they're still very young. So it's just again, getting a little bit stronger. They're both players that can use some strength to help them against bigger players and such, and just the experience of playing in harder situations against experience and just learning how to get through that. So with me, it's for both guys, it's experience.
And kind of the same general question for Ethan Cardwell. I think Cardwell is another good development story, a guy that was a 4th round pick and was last year was arguably your top rookie. And so what sort of next step for him?
Yeah, I think for him, it's now looking at it. I think when he came in last year, I think for him, he played every game, and I didn't necessarily expect that. Usually, first year guys, you come in, you expect them maybe to be in a handful of games and maybe out a handful of games and such, and that was a big win for him to go in and produce like he did and score the goals and the points that he did and play all those games. And now I think he's got to take that and say, okay, I've done this in the American League here now, and now I need to be ready for this recall. So it's like the little subtleties of recall readiness, much like Gushkin and Bordelot, of, okay, when you get called up to the Sharks, are you going to be ready to play against top lines, especially if you're on the road and they're putting out top players against you to test you as a young player? Are you ready to defend? You ready to if you're playing Edmonton and they put McDavid out there, are you ready to play against this player right now? And that's it. Those little subtleties there. So as far as what he accomplished in the American League, that's great, and I do expect him, to come in and continue that. But it'll be the subtleties of being ready for that recall now, which I think he, has put himself on the map for.
Looking at Ethan, one thing that I discussed with other people, just where does he fit in the NHL? You look at a Bordelot and a Gushin, and you see that you may disagree, but I think the thought is that those guys, when they establish themselves as NHLers, that they are going to be middle six winger scorers. Maybe obviously Bordelot can play center, but they're going to be scoring role type of guys. And if they're not doing that, that's probably where they best fit in at the NHL. But Ethan, though, seems like he's obviously has some scoring chops. He had over 20 goals in the AHL last year, but he's not maybe necessarily thought of as the high skill guy in the Bordelot Gushin caliber. So anyway, in NHL, where do you see a guy like Ethan fitting in?
Well, I think Ethan has a blend. I mean, we saw some scoring ability last year, and he had ability in the OHL to score as well, which, I mean, isn't unusual for a lot of our players in college and junior, that they score quite a bit. But he continued that in the American League. But, Ethan's straightaway skating is, as you see, he's often in quick on the forecheck and disrupting plays in that way. So he's got an ability to kind of use his skating and maybe adapt into a little bit of role playing there, a little bit of pressure D and such within there. So I think he has a couple of avenues, to get to the National Hockey League.
And you mentioned earlier in the podcast that you guys were looking down at your center depth, and you had guys that were kind of center wingers, kind of even like Cardwell or Robbins or Bordelot. A guy that came in last year, Philip Bistad, do you see him as a long-term center option for the Barracuda for right now?
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't really look at him. He has played some wing, but we look at him primarily as a center. And so you have Podorowski and Bistad as a couple of top centers for us. So
yeah, and how do you think he did when he came over at the end of last year from Sweden?
I think he did great. Again, that's really going to pay dividends, those games that he got there. So when he gets to training camp and he gets to the beginning of the American League season and such, that he's already seen quite a bit. just getting used to North America, how much quicker players are on top of you. When you're trying to make a play in that, you don't have as much time, you don't have as much space. He's experienced that a little bit, so you have to move a little bit quicker. You have to, use your strength a little bit more, and it's just the subtleties that you learn by experiential learning. He's been through that now, so that's going to pay dividends for him. Very happy for him again coming over in his second year. Post draft at 19 years old to catch the end of the year. I think was very valuable.
It was a little bit of a tough season for Philip in Sweden, at least compared to his rookie year in the SHL. Why do you think it maybe clicked a little bit in the AHL in the short time there?
I think a couple of training camps and development camps, that's why we really, like the time that we get with these guys at development camp and training camp. Every one they go to, they just learn that much more. Even if they go back to their college or junior or Europe, they just learn that much more about here, remember that much more when they come back in those situations. So I think that really helped Philip. I think it's, the one thing for him last year that's we forget because of World Juniors, because of coming over, for development camp, training camp, everything else, these guys get a lot of games. So he had, SHL games, he had World Junior games, he had games with us at the end of the year. So it's, he gets really a lot of games under his belt, and sometimes that'll wear them out a little bit, but it's also kind of building up that type of mental and physical endurance too that you'll need when you get to the National Hockey League.
And speaking of another possible centerman for you guys, Tristan Robinson. Tristan had a really tough season last year with injuries and in and out of the lineup a little bit there, or a lot there. Just where is Tristan at? Where is he at with his injuries? What do you expect from him?
Yeah, he kind of had a high ankle and just took quite a while as we've seen with that injury before, and then so it took him a while to kind of get back and then get in the swing of things. So once he did that, again, we could see, and especially with somebody with his wheels, being so fast and everything. So for him to come back, what I like about Tristan is that he is a center wing. He's played both. He had some good production for us a couple of years ago. Last year, he was just really unable to get that momentum of being in the lineup all year, and the injury kind of got in his way. So I do expect him, if he's coming off of what we saw at the end of last year and what he did the year before, I expect really, really nice season out of Tristan.
Is he fully healthy?
Yes.
Okay. And wanted to move on to the defense and sort of the jewel of the system there, at least on the Barracuda, Shakir Mukhamadullin. And just what did you see from him last year in terms of just how he became better as a pro defenseman? What did he become better at as a pro defenseman?
I think everything. He's just a sponge for development and for learning. I mean, he can skate. He's got the size. He's got the brain. Loves to defend. Loves to make plays. So he's just a lump of clay right now to mold into a really nice blend top four defenseman. Play good defense and provide some production as well. We just like that we could play him in minutes and play him in a lot of situations, and he was always just kind of, hey, give me more, bring this on. And I think the cool part of that too is I think the fans saw that along the way too, and could really he had a lot of interest from people and just love watching him because you could see how hard he works, you could see how hard he wants it. Kind of energy brought to the All-Star game, and then when he got recalled to the Sharks and everything else there too, it's just been fun to watch his progress, and I expect that to continue. I expect him to come in and push for a job.
And talk about with him getting stronger, and anything else in particular stand out that you want to see from him when he comes back this fall?
Not anything specifically, just needs to. Again, when you play that many or when you have the potential to be a defenseman that plays that many minutes in that many situations against top lines and things like that, it's just you do need to get stronger, and you do need to work on things so that you can play all those minutes and stay fresh and things like that. So it seems like a cliche. We talk about getting bigger, faster, stronger, everything else like that, but you need it. National Hockey League, you're playing against some pretty big engines there, and you really need that. So for him, it's just and I believe he had a really good summer of what I've heard, and he's going to be ready to go. And I know mentally he's a very hungry individual, and he's also in the locker room and with the staff and everybody else. He's one of those guys that kind of lights up a room when he comes in. So what you saw at the All-Star game, and that type of personality that you see there in the rink, he's the same way in the locker room. He comes around, he's got a smile, he's got a little, he kind of busts everybody's chops a little bit. He's got a little bit of that to him. Just a good teammate and everything else to be around. So really excited for Shaq's future.
That's awesome to hear, because he's not an English first speaker. I think that we don't always see that at fans and media. We don't always see that side of him. So it's really awesome to hear just how he kind of fits into a room, how he lights up a room. I guess I would ask about Shakir then, with sort of where, maybe this is hard for you to answer, but where the organization sees him. Like, is it a case where maybe you're not going to see him a lot with the Barracuda this year, that you might be expecting because what we saw in AHL last year, I think he played just 3 games there, but he looked pretty ready in that stretch. That was the impression I had. And so is he a guy that maybe you've kind of seen the last of him?
Yeah, that's up to him. He's in the mix. He really is. I think he's, what he's shown, the last picture everybody had of him is that he's right there, very, very, very close. And it's really up to him what he did in the summer and what he does in training camp to get there. But I think, I think the opportunity is in front of him. And again, sometimes that's a jagged line. Doesn't mean that guys just jump right into it and stay there forever. Right. But maybe it means more games this year. Maybe I don't know. It could mean come up and wow, he's there. Could be need some more games. Could be there for a few, back for a few, whatever. I mean, and that's. But I do expect some sort of step. I really do. I think everything we saw, I personally expect that.
And another guy who's on the cusp that is maybe a little bit underrated because he hasn't been a Sharks organization for very long is Jack Thompson. But he was one of Tampa Bay's better prospects when you guys acquired him for Anthony Duclair. What can you say about sort of his game and where it's at, and what are you expecting? What are you hoping to see from him in terms of what he can improve for next season?
Yeah, I think for him, first of all, trades are hard. When you come in, especially that time of year, and that's the only organization he had been with. Still a young player, an all-star player for Syracuse, and he had a few games up with the Tampa Bay Lightning, and so then to come in with us, learning a new system and structure and everything else that late in the season. Is really hard, but he did it well, and showed us a good glimpse here. And I expect him again, with having been through that, learned that in the final few months of the season, and also having the full summer to train and such, that he'll come in and he'll probably come in and try and say, why not me also? He, again, American Hockey League All-Star, and produced quite well at this level. Got a recall, and unfortunately, I know the first game was that tough game we had up in Edmonton at the end of the year. Right. But again, experience is experience. So you go through it and you learn a little bit and within there. But we're bullish on Jack Thompson as well.
Yeah, and I want to say it's not just because you're on the show, Joe, but really what the Sharks have done with their system over the last couple of years, and the breadth of prospects that they brought in. A guy like a Jack Thompson might have been considered a top 5 Lightning prospect, and with the Sharks, he's not. Not that you guys don't think about him, but I would say that the media, the fans, etc., that he's not thought of as much, just because you guys have your Celebrinis, your Will Smiths, your Mukumadulans, etc., right? And so that just speaks really to the work that you guys have done. That a guy like a Jack Thompson is not necessarily like top of mind when we talk about the Shark system, as he might be for another system. But anyway, moving on. Just I just thought of that just looking at his name there. But another guy in the system that first full season with the Barracuda, Valtteri Puoli. Where is his game at, and just how did he develop throughout the year? As sort of, I guess he projects as more of a shutdown physical guy.
Yeah, I think coming into is adjusting to North America. That was a big adjustment for him. Again, the time and space and things like that. The differences in style. That was probably the number one thing for him to adjust to, and I think he did. And he had some really good games. He had a couple of great games against Calgary. I remember on there. So again, he's big and strong, and just getting a few little subtleties in his game kind of worked out with adjusting to the North American game and defending quickly in that regard. He's not that far away, so it's just really experience, and I do expect him to come back and take a jump this year.
And another guy also had to deal with a lot of injuries, but I think was a little bit of a fan favorite because he just likes to hit people, is Artem Guriev. And so what can you say about where he's at? Is he healthy? Is he ready to take on a larger role next season?
Yeah, he's doing well. He's recovering right now, and he I think it'll be around training camp to where he'll meet with the doctors and we'll see where he's at. So he could be fully ready. He could be a little bit more time. We'll see. With injuries, we don't try and push anything on there, so that'll be up to the doctors and such. But coming in, I think he learned quite a bit in this past year. He loves the game. He loves to defend. He loves to punish. He's big and strong. He's what NHL teams are kind of looking for. And his is just again, like everybody else, the experience of going in and learning how to defend, when to take risks, and much like offense, hitting is a risky situation. Sure. When you're doing it, when you're not, and things like that too within that part. And he's learning that part of the pro game, and as he does, he's going to be a pretty unique and valuable player to us.
We have one more defense prospect to talk about in Gannon Larocque. He's kind of had a rough go of it with injuries in the past few years, but it seems like he stepped back on the ice this year. At least, in part, he had some starts and stops kind of thing. But how's his injury progression been? And was this year kind of like a rehab year almost for him?
Yeah, pretty much. It's, he was still junior eligible last year. And that's sometimes, as we forget, with everybody that we've been talking about is so young. And especially here, he'll be 21 years old. And it was more of a rehab year for him to kind of take it slow. And everything else, I expect him to have a full, be fully ready to go this fall, and stronger and recovered and everything else there. To he's big, right shot. He's got a good blend game to him, so I do expect good things from him. Again, sounds like a cliche. I say that from everybody, but we do. It's we're talking about first year players, and we do expect jumps from everybody as we're talking about. And that's one of the things too, is that the Barracuda roster as a whole, we will do much better when we have more second and third year players. And last year we had so many first year players, and first year players, no matter how good they are at the level below, it's such a jump up the American Hockey League and such a jump there. So I think a lot of players coming into their second year and their third year, that's really going to help us as a team as well. So I just kind of wanted to get that thought in there as well with you.
And you mentioned Mukumadulin's training, and you've heard good things about him. Obviously, as a GM, you got to keep tabs on these guys over the summer too. So, anybody else that sort of stand out? Speaking of Keegan's favorite Gushin, I think just a little bit of strength and quickness would do a lot for him. So, anyway, just in general, though, have you heard of any of your guys here just having kind of standout summers, or just things? Yeah, you've heard about some of your guys and their training this off season.
Yeah, I think it's kind of contagious around here right now because we have some competition,
Mm-hmm.
and you could see it at development camp. And I mean, these guys all see they know everybody that's coming in. 5 minutes after it happens, between watching the draft and seeing free agent signings and seeing some of the players we got last year out of college and such, and they can count. They'll say, okay, that's another defenseman. Now there's 9 or 10 of us, but only 6 are going to play. What am I going to do about it? And I think that internal competition, we don't have to say a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think most of our guys, as we're talking with them and we're seeing them at development camp, most of them can count. Most of them can see who's out there and sense that competition. And I don't think there's a whole lot of guys to where it's like their spot in the lineup is really etched in stone.
Sure.
I think guys see that what, we have to earn it, and they take it as such, and that's a good thing, and we'll never apologize for that, for competition, and we have it.
And last summer, it was I think Brandon Cole stayed most of the summer in San Jose. I think even Mukumadulin was here most of the summer, and both were kind of like, oh, that's kind of a mark to their dedication. They didn't necessarily have to be in San Jose for most of the summer, both those guys. So just curious if there are any guys this summer that just have trained most of the summer in San Jose.
I think some guys have come and gone.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of our guys, they have good situations. I know a number of guys are up in Montreal and guys in
Sure.
Toronto and such, and so they a lot of them actually kind of get together with each other and go to the same rink or go to the same trainer and such. So I think a majority of our guys are away from San Jose in the summer, back at home. We've had a few guys kind of come in. I expect in August, probably mid-August, a lot of guys start coming out. And the beauty of our situation out here now, having both the AHL and the NHL team in the same city, is guys come out and they can find their place to live because they know they're not waiting to be assigned to one or the other. They're going to be assigned to San Jose. They don't know what league, but they're going to be here, so they'll come out and train here a little earlier. So I think we're going to start to see that in the next couple of weeks.
Okay. And there's a few guys that we haven't asked you about in terms of guys who actually might make the Barracuda this coming year. They weren't with the Barracuda last year. And so just wanted to ask you about Cagnoni, Haltonen, and you guys signed Chernyshov yesterday too. Is there any higher expectation for any of these guys to be in the AHL this coming season?
Well, I think we try and keep every option open for them. Last year Landen was great with Casper Halton, and we'll see how it goes in training camp, and that'll determine. That'll be a deep discussion with our management staff and development staff on where that goes. And Chernyshov, same thing. We got a glimpse at development camp, but again, he's 18 years old with the options of junior, with the options of pro and everything else as a signed player now, and Cagnoni has options as well. So we'll see where it goes with all of them. Options are a good thing, not just to motivate them, but sometimes just players need a particular setting that it's a little bit better for them for a various reason or not. It could be more ice time. It could be playing at a certain role in the lineup, and we look at all that with that. So that's how we look at the junior and multiple option.
Zeroing in on Cagnoni in particular, though, because he is older and he had such a fantastic season in WHL last year, and him going back, he'll be going back for his overage season. And so just philosophically, how do you see sort of what an extra year in the AHL, I'm sorry, in the WHL could benefit a smaller offensive talent like Cagnoni? Like, could that be a benefit there in the WHL? And what's the benefit of sort of putting him into the AHL? Maybe not speaking specifically of him, but just generally his profile of player.
Yeah, generally when you go back in those situations to junior, it's more ice time. It's it's a bigger role and things like that. And when you are stay with the American Hockey League team, and it could be more pro games early on to start that odometer of pro style. Maybe some more training with getting bigger, quicker, stronger with our development people, and off ice type of things, and non-game type of things to get better on there too. So it's really kind of looking at that, balancing. What does a player need? Does a player need more game situation? Does a player need to play in a certain role? Does a player need more time with development coaches and such? And that's what we really, take a look at training camp, and talk amongst our group and figure out what the best is. It's usually never 100% one way or the other. There's good and bad with both, and pluses, minuses with both. But we take it very seriously, and we use training camp to discuss it.
Right. And I guess comparing Cagnoni to, say, Halton, is it fair to say that Cagnoni is very much there's going to be a very, 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 very deep discussion in terms of what the best fit for him. And of course, obviously what he does in camp is going to be a big sort of important display, or important sort of a demonstration of where he fits best, because you mentioned the obvious things about what can benefit a player going back to junior: more ice time, more responsibility. Well, he obviously had a ton of that, and he excelled with that last season. And so kind of wonder, like, well, what else is there for him to learn or do in the WHL? But is that fair that Cagnoni and Halton Cagnoni is a bit more of this is going to be a real decision here?
Yeah, I think, as we go in, all that stuff is brought up, and again, with the expansion of the development department that we've had, that Mike put in place, like Lucas Spiza and Todd Marchand talk to Luca Cagnani, every week, a couple of times a week. So, and they know him very well. They know what he needs, where his mind is at, what he's thinking, what he needs as a person, what he needs as a player, everything there too. So a lot of this has already kind of taken place, and they come in and again, kind of paint the picture of that. And that's what we use training camp for. And it's not to go and look in training camp, just what are these two weeks going to bring, and make a decision based on that. But it's kind of the culmination. Maybe we'll see, okay, he took a jump in this summer, or maybe we see on here, this is something we didn't realize that he struggles with a little bit, or whatever. And it's just another, piece to add to the discussion to go on there. So it's, we'll see at the end. We really honestly reserve judgment on all of it. We use our time wisely to discuss it and keep our options open.
Okay. Well, Joe, I really appreciate your time here. Just got a couple more for you here. I have one, and then Keegan's got a Sharks question for you. So my just general question for you is, do you expect this Barracuda team right now to make the playoffs? Obviously, the Barracuda haven't made the playoffs in a little while, but we talk about their really high-end free agent signings this offseason, which a lot of credit to you guys for that. And also, too, you mentioned the second and third year players, guys like maybe Robbins, Gushin, Bordelot, guys like that, just guys with a little more AHL experience coming back. And so that's going to also help sort of where you guys are on a night-to-night basis. So anyway, do you think that this team as constructed is a playoff caliber AHL team, or do you still feel like there's more to add?
No, I think we do have the ability to make a jump. I think we have the tools and the ability to make progress, to get over the hump of some of the games last year, to where maybe we were ahead and we found a way to lose. We'll try and find a way to win those games. And again, that's not always by talent. That's just doesn't just organically happen. It's a conscious effort to take the talent that we have and work with everybody and say, okay, what's our next steps, our little steps to get over the hump, and then win those games, and that results in playoffs. Now, the difference with the American League and then NHL right now is that 7 of our 10 teams out of our Pacific Division do make the playoffs. So I think that is a goal for us. I think it's something that we could do, but we have to make those jumps and not just saying adding talent and say that's going to do it, but kind of learning how to win as a group on there. And that's our next step. And we know that's what we're focused on. Again, it doesn't happen if it was just kind of collecting talent and doing it. The outcomes in all these leagues would be different. It's taking this group here and teaching them how to win at the American Hockey League level. That's the next step. Once that happens, I do expect us to be a playoff team. I think, that there's a reason why we got these players that came from pretty good teams and organizations. Sure. Podorowski, his experience being the playoff MVP in the American League says something. And, being in all and winning 2 Calder Cups says something. Jimmy Schultz being in the finals here says something. He has the experience. Those guys have the experience to come in and add to the group and say, okay, in the American League, these are some little steps we can take. He can help with all this. And we have that. So just adding, players like that and Luca Carlson and just being aware of these things, I do truly believe that we can take a jump.
Love it. I have one more question for you, and thank you again so much for your time. I know we've gone a little bit over on our time, I think. Joe, so the Sharks have had a lot of management turnover and a lot of turnover in general since the Doug Wilson regime stepped out and Mike Grier has stepped in, and you were part of that turnover at some point. You served as the Sharks interim GM in 2022. During that time, probably one of the biggest moves was re-signing Tomas Hertl to an 8-year deal. And then this past season, a couple months ago, actually, he was traded to Vegas. I think my question is, what was the negotiation like with Tomas at that time? And what do you think changed with regards to how he or the Sharks saw his future in San Jose? I know it's a hard-hitting last question, but...
Yeah, I think it's, one of those things is we had won for so many years, and we had actually taken a few steps back. And I remember in 14-15 season, we struggled. We didn't make the playoffs, and we're kind of saying, where are we right now? And then the next year we get to the Cup Finals, and so you never know in some of the years that you get to where you just kind of don't know where you're at. We had so many years of just, okay, let's double down. Let's see what we can do with this group, because, we had a group of signed players and players that have won together, and, we're kind of defaulting to that of, let's keep the band together as long as we can.
Sure.
Try and keep winning, because it has worked for us to do it. Not blindly. It was calculated to say, okay, at some point maybe this isn't going to work within there. Tomas and other players that we had wanted to keep this together and give it another shot and try and keep winning. And we believe that we with things going perfectly, maybe some other things might have happened within there, but it didn't. It didn't between some injuries, just not having enough hands on deck and all that stuff. It didn't work, and now we've retooled officially, and so we just tried to keep it going as long as we could.
And then do you think eventually Tomas kind of saw that the retool, the rebuild was going in that direction and that kind of thing? Yeah,
I can't really speak for him.
Sure.
I think everybody has their own time frame on what they want to do in the years that they have. Everybody has a finite amount of years to play, and
Absolutely.
what they want to do within there, and so I can't really speak for him on that. But it was good shark for us for a long time here.
Joe, you can say the word rebuild now. You don't have to say retool anymore. Rebuild is a safe word now from what I understand. So
that's right. We had a few different terms for that, but
reset, refresh, retool.
Exactly.
It's a rebuild.
It's a rebuild.
Exactly.
We're in it. We're doing it.
Well, and it's even hard, I think, until you get to the point to where you see, okay, a lot of the tearing down is done. That's
Sure.
and then now it's the building up part, and that's the exciting part, and that's, I think, the part that people feel right now. So, within there, that's the funner part of that.
And that's the reason why fans watch the Barracuda, to round it all out.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much, Joe, for your time. Sheng, you got any more questions?
Nope. That's it. Yeah. So I'm happy that we're in the good part of the rebuild now.
That's right. That's right.
Absolutely.
But no, good talking with you guys, and enjoy the rest of your summer.
All right.
You too.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks.